Hello, this is Benjamin Zander. I'm the conductor of the Boston Philharmonic Orchestra and the Boston Philharmonic Youth Orchestra, and we're listening to the Topcast. You only have hope if you doubt, right? if you think it's not going to work. So faith is that which enables us to go forward, knowing that we're making a difference, knowing that what we're doing is of significance and it will have an impact on everybody we touch. And that is, if we give up.
Well, g'day teachers, and welcome back to the Topcast. It's so great to hang out with you, and thank you so much for being a part of the shows this month, this term, this semester, this year. I cannot believe it's November already. How crazy is that? Well, in today's show, we have an incredibly special guest. Yes, the one and only Benjamin Zander, conductor, author, music educator extraordinaire, is joining us, and this is a wonderful chat. I just delighted in spending time with him. He's at the piano. You'll hear him perform a whole lot of stuff. We basically get our own little concert with Ben Zander. We also were interrupted by an earthquake, which happened in Melbourne on the day I actually recorded this one, which is pretty funny. I think we've cut it out of the final version. It's actually funnier to watch the video recording. If you haven't seen that, then head over to my Facebook or our Top Music Teaching Facebook group, and you'll be able to see that recorded live. That was quite an experience. Don't worry, everything's fine. It was less than 6 on the Richter scale and didn't do a huge amount of damage, thankfully, across Melbourne, and no deaths or injuries, which was good, but it certainly shook us up, literally. Anyway, that happened midway through. We dealt with some phone calls and all sorts of things going on, but we have edited it down, and it's a great, fun discussion about everything that Ben has done over the course of his career and the things he's focused on. And we also got the opportunity for some of our members to pose questions for Ben, which I asked him about, and he talks about why he became a conductor and whether he misses playing his cello, which is his primary instrument. And we talk about his one buttock playing, which is quite fun, and also things like his A student and his books and everything in a nice kind of summary. If you haven't already seen his TED Talk or any of his videos on YouTube, then I do encourage you to go and check those out. But it was wonderful to also go further and go deeper with Ben and explore some areas that I haven't seen him talk about in the same way on any of the videos that I've seen. So you're in for an absolute treat, and I look forward to coming back at the end of the podcast and catching up with all the news before we sign off. All right, here we go. Well, welcome to the show, Ben Zander. It is an absolute privilege and honour to have you on my show. Thanks for coming along.
It's a pleasure. I'm delighted. Well, just to talk to musicians and talk to music teachers, that's the best thing. The music teachers are carrying a sacred flame, and they are giving the power, the expressive openness of music to the younger generation. So it's probably the most important job after doctors. And I'll tell you something very interesting. When I gave a class once, my father was 94 and blind, and towards the end of his life, and he observed me doing a class, a master class, and at the end of it, I went to see him, and he held up his finger, as he always did when he was saying something very important. He said, "I see," which was funny because, of course, he was blind. He said, "I see you're actually a member of the healing profession." And I remember thinking that was the highest accolade I could imagine for a musician, to be named as a member of the healing profession. So I think if we think of ourselves as members of the healing profession, it actually gives a lightness to our step, breath in our hearts, and warmth and the sense of courage to give what we have to offer to young people.
Well, I think that's the end of the show. You've wrapped it up beautifully. I don't think there's anything else to say. No, that was a wonderful introduction. I appreciate that. And I know everyone listening will be enjoying hearing those words from you. And when I mentioned to my members and people and listeners that I'd be interviewing you, they were all just could not wait to hear from you, but they all had one thing to say to you, and that is just a massive thank you. Thanks for all that you've done for music around the world, for both classical music and orchestras and instrumental teaching and everything. It's made a huge difference, and you have inspired many, many thousands of people and teachers and musicians. So thank you.
I think we have to double that, because the TED Talk is now at 22 million views.
I looked it up, and it was, I think, because you've got it on YouTube as well, and between the two channels.
Between the two, it's over 22 million. And the only reason I dwell on that, I'm not into measurement a lot, but this is an interesting case, because 22 million people, or views, is too many to ignore. In other words, there are vast numbers of people who are being pulled in by this. Apparently, it's the most popular TED Talk in China, which is interesting. And what we're dealing with, it comes back to this issue of being part of the healing profession, because it's partly about music. The premise of that talk is that everybody loves classical music. They just haven't found out about it yet. So that's my premise, and that is a possibility statement. In other words, it doesn't go down the downward spiral of, oh, well, they don't understand it, oh, it's too difficult, oh, it's European males, or all that stuff that we hear about the downward spiral of classical music. I say you ain't seen nothing yet. I think it's on the rise, and more people are listening and appreciating and understanding. And our job as teachers, and we're all teachers, because a maestro, they say maestro, immediately you think of somebody on a podium who's very grand and important. Not at all. Maestro is a teacher. Every elementary school teacher in Italy is a maestro or a maestra. So our job is to open the minds and hearts to the power and beauty of classical music. And it adds more. It's not just a pleasure. It's not just entertainment. It's actually a way of being, enabling people to be more human than they would be. Because just think of Beethoven. Beethoven was deaf. He was alone. He was sick. He was in a miserable state, at one point suicidal. And then suddenly, out of the depths of his soul, he said, and who can stay gloomy when that's happening?
Quite right.
Isn't that right? So the thing is, music has power to actually bypass the brain and go directly to the molecules, and they shift in the face of such powerful way, whether it's that or and that F sharp against the G. It's like a knife in the heart. It's that sadness, that despair, that anguish when you lose somebody who you love. And you can't stay chirpy while that's being played, because this music has such power. Now, for the first concert of the Boston Philharmonic, we've been silent for nearly 2 years. And the last concert in Symphony Hall in Boston, which was one of the greatest, some say the greatest concert hall in the world, acoustically, the last concert was given by my youth orchestra. We did Petrushka and the Symphonie Fantastique. That was the last sound heard in Symphony Hall till now. When we start in October next month, what should we play? Right? You think, well, we'll play the Beethoven Fifth, to bring everybody back, and maybe the Tchaikovsky Violin Concerto to get everybody excited again. No, we're playing Bruckner's Eighth Symphony. Imagine, Bruckner's Eighth Symphony. A massive spiritual journey up a mountain, making tremendous demands on the listener. But when you get to the top, when you get to the climax of the slow movement, and you see that view, the exhilaration, the liberation, the sense of fulfillment and renewal of hope that music can give, with all the 8 horns, the Wagner tubas, the trombones, it's just unbelievable. And in Symphony Hall, of all things, where the sound billows from the stage out to the top of the balconies, it'll just be absolutely overwhelming.
That's okay.
But it's all right. The phone is fine because phones happen.
That's right. And I could tell that, I mean, the passion that you have for getting back in front of an orchestra and bringing musicians together has clearly not.
We just got to wait. He's just got to do this.
Okay.
We should have done that before we start.
That's right. Are we clear again?
You know what happens when we say, when something goes wrong like that, we make a mistake. Alfonso made a mistake. He's supposed to turn the phones off, right? Before we do something like this. Do you know what we say when something like that happens? We say, how fascinating. We throw our hands in the air and up, looking up, we say, how fascinating. Because by throwing your hands in the air, you lift the spirit rather than go into the downward spiral of misery and self-absorption. And because it's how fascinating, you get to learn something from it. He will not make the same mistake again.
You clearly wouldn't be one of those performers who advocate a phone goes off in the audience, or someone does something strange or claps at the wrong time and they get glared at by other people, or the performer on stage has to stop and restart. I guess you're probably not that kind of a person.
Well, I tell you, once I started again in a concert. I'm 82, so I've had a lot of concerts. And one concert, I was doing the Mendelssohn Italian Symphony, and as you probably know, and your listeners know, it starts with so 2 bars are well, one of the violinists in my orchestra thought it was and came in a bar early. Well, we couldn't go on. It was not a shy entrance. He was very
he was going for it.
Right. So we stopped. And I smiled and I quietly said to the orchestra, how fascinating. And then we started again. And when we got to the intermission, the personnel manager said, I know who did that. Would you like to know? And I said, no, I did that. And she was very surprised because obviously I didn't play the notes. I didn't play the violin, but it happened on my watch. Do you see what I mean? In other words, I did something that confused him. And I say, when something goes wrong, it's always the conductor's fault. Now, it's not strictly speaking true, because if a horn player goes on a note, he made the mistake. But I say that if the conductor had given him his full, undivided attention, with his eyes looking at him with a sense of anticipation and excitement, he wouldn't have made that mistake. So I take on myself the responsibility that if something goes wrong, it's my fault. I also say that if the eyes of the players are not shining, I ask myself the question, who am I being that the players' eyes are not shining? And we can do that with our children, with our spouses, with our friends, with our clients. If the eyes are not shining, who am I being? Rather than blaming them for not paying enough attention or not caring or not being serious enough or whatever we say. We always blame people and find fault with people and threaten people. And that doesn't create a good relationship. And they're less likely to be free and expressive if they're in that kind of mode of fear. So it's a transformation of the relationship, which is very important for teachers. We're all teachers. If we think of ourselves, everybody is a teacher, because if you're an 8-year-old and you have a dog, or you're a 9-year-old and you have a younger brother, there you are, you're a teacher. And so these principles of leadership, I call them principles of leadership, are relevant and significant for everybody. And a leader is anybody. A leader can be the person in the 11th chair of the cello section. It doesn't have to be the person on the podium.
Now, you've got a great passion for bringing classical music awareness and understanding of it to the world. I wonder whether there is a sense, I think, of sometimes in the classical music world of a bit of snobbery sometimes around the formality of it and what you should wear and how you should act, and that you can't clap between movements of a three-part sonata, even if it's been the most brilliant thing and you've been moved to tears. Do you think that is part of that doesn't help the cause?
Well, it's a very interesting question. It's not something to be treated lightly. Just take the clothing that we wear. I mean, I wear a very elaborate dress in order to conduct a concert, but so do an awful lot of other people. Think of a priest or think of a policeman. Policemen stand. Imagine the policeman said, "Oh, well, that's old-fashioned to wear that ridiculous costume. Why don't we just wear jeans and a T-shirt?" People would take it less seriously. They'd be less likely to follow the rules if the guy, it's the costume, the tradition, the habits are very, very valuable because they're part of the ritual, and these musical experiences lift people up from the normal everyday life, the mundane and the banal, and take them to a plane. That's why you play a Bruckner symphony, because there's nothing mundane about it. It's not even like in Mozart, it's all about conversation and intricate relationships between people. Bruckner's not. It's about the cosmic conversation. You look up and wonder what our place is in the cosmos. So to have a formality there, the clapping is a very interesting one because you get to the end of the first movement of the Brahms second piano concerto, the desire to clap is overwhelming, and I think you should do it. I think it would be absurd really not to. But what I teach my audiences, and I have an enormous advantage because I speak to the audience, it's become a tradition in my concerts, 45 minutes at 6:45 for an 8 o'clock concert.
Mm-hmm.
The audience gathers, and they don't all gather because they don't all know about it. It's the same thing, classical music, they don't all know about it. But the people who know about it gather in the hall for 45 minutes of enlightenment, I would say. What to listen for, what to expect, what the composer is trying to say, what experience we've had in preparing it, what particular issues we've been dealing with, and they get very engaged and involved. And I say, and one of the concerts of the three that we do is what's called Discovery, and that's live. In other words, I do it actually in the concert, not before. And there I have a chance to say, please, when you get to the end of this movement, don't clap, because the whole experience is one thing. And let the applause well up in you gradually as the piece goes along. And when you get to the end, and you will definitely know when the end is, then let it all out in the most effusive, grand, and enthusiastic way, where if you get some kind of desultory clapping in between, you don't get the effect. And that's one of the beauties of classical music. You know, I had this wonderful experience. I was at the Grammys because my Bruckner Fifth Symphony was nominated at the Grammys. And so I was there, and I met one of the pop singers, and he said, "How long is your song?" And I said, "Oh, it's about 85 minutes. He said, "Oh, mine's 3 minutes." Well, that's the difference, right? A pop song lasts 3 minutes and explores what you can explore in 3 minutes. And some of the pop songs are absolutely staggeringly beautiful. Billie Holiday's song, you know, you wouldn't want to listen to anything else at certain moments. But it explores only what you can do in 3 minutes. In 85 minutes, or in Mahler's Ninth, the case of the Ninth Symphony, which I took on tour with my youth orchestra, those 90 minutes explore everything that human beings are capable of experiencing. And so what a story to be able to share. And so we expect of the audience some of the same discipline and listening skills and caring and availability that we expect of the players. And so the players dress up too. And so everybody's feeling, now this is something special. And I just went to a wedding. Actually, I was the priest at the wedding. For a day, I became the priest at a student. Two students of mine got married day before yesterday. It was yesterday, actually. It was fantastic. And it was a wonderful thing. And it was the most heavenly place, and the sun going down and the moon coming up, and this woman in a white dress. I mean, like, you couldn't imagine anything more beautiful. And everybody was dressed up and excited. That's a memorable event, right? We'll all remember that event. And being memorable is part of what we're doing in life, because I always say life consists of creating memories. I remember my daughter and I went on a holiday together, and she was about 16. And I remember one day she said, "Dad, before we go in, let's have one more memory." I thought, now she's got it. She's got it. She knows what we're talking about here. One more memory. And I think if we could go through life saying to ourselves, let's have one more memory. And these performances, which we pour so much love and attention and hard work into, can be memorable in ways that very few things can. And I say to my players, in your audience, there's going to be at least one person who's never heard a classical concert. And there's going to be one person who will never hear another one.
Mm.
And if you keep that in mind, you won't play on automatic pilot. That's the death, not only of classical music, but of our life, which is playing on automatic pilot. We don't think. Whether it's in church, we say, "Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be." We sing, "Happy birthday to you." That's automatic pilot. We're not thinking. But how do you sing "Happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday, dear James, happy birthday"? You get 1,000 people doing that all together. Wow, the person will never forget. And you have them standing on a chair and everybody pouring their hearts out. That's and then we go to school and the children are singing, "Row, row, row your boat gently down the street." Merrily, no, it's not merry at all. For them, "Row, row, row your boat gently down the street. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream." The world would change if children would want to do that.
There's something there that teachers can take away, because it is easy for us to fall into routines of what we teach and how we go about teaching, and even the interpretation that we encourage our students to take on, because a lot of that does come from the teacher.
Because now we come to the heart of the matter. Last year we had silence, right? We had no music because of COVID. And in the case of the Boston Philharmonic, that means closing down. We couldn't play a note. And what we did for the Boston Philharmonic was, with their professionals, we raised a lot of money to pay them anyway, because they had to pay their mortgages and look after their children and pay for childcare and so on. So we raised a lot of money, and those who needed it, and about half the orchestra really needed it, we gave them that. And you know what has emerged from that is absolutely fantastic, is that there's a level of gratitude being expressed by those professional musicians that I've never seen before. And when we start the first rehearsal of the Bruckner next Sunday, I can imagine there's going to be a sound in that room that's even more beautiful than what we've heard before, because of the gratitude. But with the youth orchestra, it's fascinating, because I said, we have to do something. You can't tell the youth orchestra. So what we did is I said, we're going to turn you into conductors. Everybody is a conductor, all the members of the orchestra. Now, they volunteered for it because I didn't want to impose it, because it's very hard work to be a conductor. And I made it into the story of Shackleton going to Antarctic. He put an advertisement out for he made it really an impossible journey, as if it was going to be awful. And he got 28 wonderful men, and he went and he came back with all of them. And the reason he came back with all of them is because he said, optimism is the true moral courage. He wouldn't allow anybody to speak anything other than in an upbeat, positive, what I call possibility way. We have a book called The Art of Possibility. I recommend it highly. It's in 20.
A lot of my members have talked about it, and I've got some questions on it for you actually later on.
Fabulous book, and it's sold over 1 million copies. This is now part of the language, The Art of Possibility. Anyway, I trained them over the year, every week for 2.5 hours. We met on Saturdays and acted and studied as if we were conductors. That means the cellists become interested in the flutes and the trombones into the percussion. And we studied the Mahler Fourth Symphony in great detail. They all had a conducting score. And day before yesterday, in the first rehearsal, of the orchestra. What did we study? Mahler's Fourth Symphony. And now, instead of being an orchestra of players, it was an orchestra of conductors. And it was magical, absolutely magical, something new that none of us had experienced before. It's a new idea of an orchestra actually being, and these are children, I mean, these are young people. The youngest is 12 and they're up to 21. And they played with such exquisite beauty. And you know what I do? I don't know if you know this, but I put on the stand of every musician a white sheet of paper. It's called the white sheet. And on it, they can write anything they want. They have to sign it, but otherwise they can talk about any aspect of it. And I outlined one of these sheets. It's so beautiful what this young woman wrote. She's 15 years old, and this is what she wrote. She just joined the orchestra. So this is the first time she didn't know the Mahler Fourth Symphony. And she refers to 2:30 is the time it begins. And I always say it in an exaggerated English accent. So they always say 2:30. And in my organization of the orchestra, because it's Mahler and Mozart, we're doing also the Hafner Symphony, I put the first violins on the left and the second violins on the right. So they're separated.
Okay.
And the cellos are therefore next to the first violins. And this is what she wrote. I write to you approximately 12 hours after the conclusion of our first rehearsal of the season and my first ever rehearsal with the Boston Philharmonic Youth Orchestra. And then she says, as we neared the end of the rehearsal, you suggested that we test the waters of the third movement of the Mahler Symphony. That's the Fourth Symphony. As the 16 bars of rest greeted us, my stand partner and I looked at each other in disbelief and simply chuckled. Certainly we did not greet it with effusion, nor did we wish to count 64 beats in sheer silence, but also apprehensively waiting for what Mahler has in store for us. I abandoned all qualms and breathed with your cue.
Wow.
And then she says, roughly 6 bars into the rest, I began to feel something internally that I've never felt before. A realization of why music brings people to tears. A realization of why music is the universal language. The beauty of performing with other incredibly gifted and talented musicians is this ability to not only learn, but to listen. Listening to other musicians internally, but not conspicuously, exchanging said gifts is what I believe enhances the music and takes it to the next level of performance. Those 64 beats have so much in them, so much energy, exuberance, and joy. Sitting right beside the cellos, I was able to feel the connection between the music and myself. And the exchange in gifts was palpable. And that is what sparks emotion from the crowd. So I write this white sheet to thank you for giving me the opportunity to explore beyond the mere notes on the paper and inviting me to share a bit of the joy I feel while playing to the BPYO community, counting down to the days till 2:30. She wrote that yesterday.
That was a 15-year-old?
15-year-old.
That is
And
extraordinary.
That's how they write. It's just amazing. And I'm putting all these white sheets onto my website, which is just about to come out. We're going to have an incredible website in which it's going to explore the whole world of music and possibility and so on. I can't wait to get it out in the world so that people can share in this. And this COVID time has been so productive because I gave a class on COVID on Zoom, and my assistant, another assistant, said he would arrange to get some conductors along and we didn't have any music. It was just a screen and waving our arms. 274 conductors turned up for that conversation. Wow. They're all online now. So all this stuff I can send out to all these, I think it's 300 by now, in 22 different countries and so on. So it's a very, very exciting time. We're in the middle of an explosion of awareness and of listening and of love and communication and inclusion like we've never experienced before. So don't despair.
I'm I've got some member questions that came through from some of your fans.
Yes,
one of them, Sarah Hanrahan over in Ireland, she says, at what point did you make the move from playing to conducting? And do you ever regret stepping away from your instrument to become a conductor?
No, I didn't. I had a very funny thing. I was a cellist, and I love playing the cello. I don't do it anymore because in order to play the cello, you have to practice, and I don't have time to practice the cello. So that's behind me. But I tell you, the moment that I moved between the two was very funny. I was a very experienced and very good coach for chamber music, and also a good cello teacher, young. But I'd done it a lot. And I went for a job when I moved to America. I went to apply for a job teaching cello and chamber music at a summer school. And the lady hired me because I was very experienced. And then she said, when we were having tea afterwards, she said, incidentally, we're looking for a conductor for the orchestra. Do you know anybody who could do that? And I said, I'd love to do that. She said, are you very experienced? I said, oh, yes, very. Now, at that moment, I hadn't actually conducted. And of course, she didn't have Google to look it up. But the beauty of it was that I was, in fact, very experienced because playing the cello and playing chamber music and coaching is exactly what a conductor does. So when you have that phrase in the piano, all the conductor is doing is making manifest with his hands and his face and his breathing and his body what he's feeling about the music. And that's what conducting is. So the difference between playing an instrument and conducting an orchestra is very, very, very slim. And of course, you have to learn a lot of things in order to be an effective conductor. When I started out, I was a string player, so I conducted everybody as if they were string players. And that doesn't work for the oboe, for instance.
Right, or the tuba.
So, right, you have to give different gestures for every instrument, and you have to learn all the combinations of it. It's fascinating. And all I was doing was playing on a bigger canvas. I mean, that's all. It's no different. A Brahms symphony and a Brahms piano quartet is the same musical experience, just writ larger.
Were you trained formally in conducting, or were you self-taught?
Well, self-taught, I don't know. I was trained by the players because with the white sheets, you see, they would tell me if something didn't work. I remember a wonderful moment. I was doing the Hindemith symphonic metamorphosis, and there's a jazzy passage in there. And I was doing the jazziness with my body. And the first trumpet wrote on his white sheet, he said, Ben, just give us the beats. We'll play the music.
Don't dance.
Give us the beat. Well, that was a lesson for me because they'd tell me all if there's something that goes wrong, or they even tell me if they don't like the tempo. Then because they've signed it, we can have a conversation. You see, because I know who it is, I can call them up. We can have an email exchange. And they feel equal to me. So the thing that's very important is this flattening out of the hierarchy so that the conductor doesn't feel superior on his podium, but that we're really all, my job is to enable them to play beautifully, as I say, to awaken possibility in other people. That's leadership. And so for me to do that as a conductor, and in addition, you've seen the interpretation classes on YouTube, and they're being seen now by hundreds and thousands of people, and millions, actually. So that's chamber music, or maybe coaching a violinist or coaching a cello. There's a cello class that I give on the Elgar Cello Concerto, which has been seen by nearly 800,000 people. Just that one class with me and a teenage cello student.
It's wonderful how much you've shared on YouTube, and I encourage all the listeners to go and just type your name in and enjoy.
Off you go. Yeah. And the thing, what's beautiful about it is that people who don't know music and who aren't trained can get inside a piece of music this way by seeing somebody teach the piece and talk about what it's about and encourage the student to sing or play the music in a more expressive way. That's a way for ordinary people to learn about music, much better than just hearing it, because they may waft over them, but they don't get engagement with it. All of the miracle of the internet is just beyond belief in bringing music, deeply engaged music, and there's no doubt classical music takes more
work, effort,
more effort, because you know that thing that I do in the TED Talk, but it's a kind of unique. The TED Talk, the Chopin piece that I talk about starts on a B. Now, already you know that's not an end. This is the end. So it's going on a journey, right? So it repeats the same note, again the same note, again the same note, and now it's going on a journey to now it's got to F sharp, to F sharp, and we think, what is the next thing? Of course, to go to there, but that would be much too early because we only got half the piece. So he goes and says, let's do it again. Back to that B, C, B, different harmonies this time. Now it gets exciting. There's the F sharp. And now finally to E. Ooh, but it's the wrong chord because E, but it said, that's a deceptive cadence. I always say to my students, when you have a deceptive cadence, you raise your eyebrows, and everybody will know.
Or just one of them. I can't do one of them.
And now we think we must be getting home. And then finally, and everybody feels, oh, wow. And everybody in the world, that's why this piece, this TED Talk can be so popular in China, because Chinese music is totally different. But the Western scale is something that every human being feels. It's fascinating why that is, because you think, sorry. Isn't it interesting? Because everybody, exactly. And that's human beings. That's not Germans and French and English and Americans. That's everybody in the world feels that B, wanting to go to the C, because it's built into the structure of the harmonic scale, the Pythagorean scale that the Greeks discovered thousands of years ago. That's based into our, and so Wagner, who takes the harmony to the absolute extreme, can build a whole opera on the idea of suspending and delaying the satisfaction until the final note of the piece 5 hours later. Tristan and Isolde, in order to describe the yearning and longing of the lovers in the story. Whereas in Meistersinger, everything's in C major and it's all about cobblers and regular people and ordinary society. He created a completely new language for each opera. Isn't that amazing? Completely different, based on this 12-note system that we have. I mean, it's a kind of an extraordinary miracle and one of the great mysteries of life that we have this music. And imagine life without this music.
My goodness, I think I could learn so much by just listening to you interpret, explore, explain these amazing pieces of music. Our time's limited, though. I'm very conscious. I've got a couple more questions that I'd love to ask you.
But I would say one thing about that is that at 82, I'm literally more excited, more engaged, more involved in music than I ever have been. So I recommend the 80s to your listeners.
That's good. I've got a while to go.
Yeah, the 80s are the fulfillment of it all. Anyway, go on.
One of the other key themes of your career and your presentations have been this idea of one buttock playing. One of our listeners asked, for students who play with very heavy impulses and can't hear it in themselves, even when hearing examples of what it should be like or recordings of themselves, how do you help them hear and remove those extra impulses?
Well, that's a beautiful question. I mean, this is a life question. You understand, it's not just about music. Because people live life, many people live life with many heavy beats. They step one step at a time. The idea that a beat, that a bar of music is like a beat is essential to this notion. So if you take the Ninth Symphony, everybody knows, right? So if you think Freude, schöne Götter, Funken, Tochter, and you often see choruses singing that and with their heads going up and down on
heads
every
nodding,
note.
yeah.
Right. Okay. But now move the tempo a little faster, and instead of Freude, you get Freude, schöne Götter, Funken. Instead of doing heavy light, heavy light, heavy light, heavy light, you start having Freude, schöne Götter funken, Tochter aus Elysium, wir betreten feuertrunken ihm. Now go a little faster and you get Freude, schöne Götter funken, aus Elysium, wir betreten feuertrunken ihm, nicht dein Heiligtum, deine Zauberin, was die and you've got one buttock playing. All right. So the thing is, you're thinking not in terms of beats, but in terms of bars. So every bar, or this one. Now listen to the. One, two, three, four. Or this. I'm joining these notes. Already you've got 4 bars in one phrase, and Chopin writes a slur over the whole thing. He writes it over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 bars. One slur. That's the idea of one buttock playing. And I remember somebody came to a talk I was giving, and I was working with a young pianist. And I said, to this young pianist, trouble with you, you're a 2 buttock player. You should be a 1 buttock player. And then I pushed his body, and suddenly the thing took flight. And then I got this letter from a president of a corporation in Ohio. He wrote, I was so moved by that. He said, I went back, I transformed my entire company into a 1 buttock company. I have no idea what he said to them.
or how it looked.
No, how it looked when he finished. I have no idea. But anyway, it's a way of being. And all of this is really about being. It's who we're being in the world that matters. How we walk down the street, how we greet people, how we say hello to people. Because, we're so careless about, how are you? I say, okay, not bad, hanging in there. I said, friend, I said, Larry, how are you? He said, breathing. Well, I tell you what, my kids in the youth orchestra, because they're tuned to this, you see, they're tuned to this way of thinking. So I stopped one of my kids going into the rehearsal hall a few years back, and I said, John, how are you? He said, if I were any better, I'd be a twin. I mean, talk about being this is a 15-year-old kid. If I were any better, I'd be a twin, he said. And here I am telling you about it 5 years later. That's the beauty of this. And your eyes, I have to tell you, your listeners can't see, but your eyes are shining bright like stars. And that's what we're talking about. I've given up completely on caring about wealth and fame and power. Those are the things that most people are obsessed about, wealth and fame and power. I only care about how many shining eyes there are around me.
Hopefully our teachers can look for it in their students as well during the week.
That's right. And if the eyes are not shining, don't blame them. Ask yourself the question, who am I being that my kid's eyes are not shining?
Mm. One thing I did notice just in your one buttock playing is you do use a lot of gesture. I
Yeah,
wonder, going back to Rebecca's point about kids that challenged by feeling longer phrases and gestures, is there physical movement in the body,
yeah,
the conducting that you're doing, that could help feel that?
absolutely.
They almost conduct as they're listening to music over big phrases.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And of course, the famous story that I always love telling about the two shoe salesmen who go to Africa to see if they can sell shoes in the 1900s. One of them writes a telegram back to Manchester and says, situation hopeless, stop, they don't wear shoes. The other one says, glorious opportunity, they don't have any shoes yet. Now, what happens to our body when we say the word glorious? Glorious opportunity. Immediately, the hands go up, the head goes up, the breathing is, and suddenly we're in a possibility mode, which goes with the idea of glorious opportunity. So what we say controls how we are being with our bodies and our connections and our relationships. So be careful about what you think.
Mm. One other question that we got through was about your A method. Your
Yes.
your idea of giving. You'd be better to explain it. But the teacher asked, perhaps if you could explain it and then answer this quick question, which was how it might work in an instrumental studio setting, because you use it, I think, more with university level
Here's
classes.
this is how it worked.
Or does it in fact work with one-on-one
Yeah,
lessons?
it works everywhere.
Okay.
What the A is again about relationship. So what happened was I taught a class, a graduate class at the New England Conservatory in musical interpretation. And so people were playing. This is graduate students. So they're in their 20s, they're young professionals. And what I found was that their body language showed how fearful they were. They were fearful about their grades, competitions, auditions, the career, the profession, all of that. And it was showing up in tension in the body. And so my wonderful partner and former wife, Rosamond, suggested that because we wrote the book together, The Art of Possibility is a joint venture between a psychotherapist, Ros, and me. And she said, give them an A in the first class, but it's not enough just to give them all an A, which I did. I gave them an A in every class. I mean, every year the class got an A in the first class, but that wasn't enough because then they'd say, yeah, but what's my grade really? So what I did was I asked them to write a letter, and the letter was written in September when the class began, but the date on the letter was May of the next year. So they were writing about the end of the class, and it began with these words. They all had to begin with the same words. Dear Mr. Zander, I got my A because. Right? So then they would write about who they would have become by May without the voice telling them that they can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I would then teach the person that they'd written about, right? So all my students were A students, which was great for me because surrounded by stars. So this works with everything. It works when you get into a taxi and you talk to the taxi driver. It works when you go to a restaurant and you give an A to the waitress. It works when you talk to your mother-in-law, because what you're usually doing when you talk to your mother-in-law is giving her a C minus. It works when the Israelis are talking to the Arabs, which unfortunately is a disaster because they all give each other an F. And so no wonder things are in trouble. So the giving of the A is a kind of cornerstone of the possibility model. You're speaking to the best part of the person that you're interacting with, right? And in this marriage ceremony, one of the things I said to them was, I don't give advice, but I heard a very nice thing. A very old lady said, always treat your spouse as well as you would treat a stranger. It's a wonderful piece of advice. I mean, don't allow yourself to give the person you've chosen to spend the rest of your life with worse than you would treat a stranger.
Right.
That's good advice, actually, for this old lady. So, what the giving of the A is, it's a genius idea, and it is the idea that we can all take on, and it's speaking to the best part of. So whether you're teaching a cellist or or a big class or conducting an orchestra. And a member of the Philharmonia said something very interesting, because I do a lot of work with the Philharmonia. I do all my recordings with the Philharmonia. They in London, and it's an incredible orchestra. And the piccolo player, who's a kind of leader, he said, something happens to us when you come here. I'm not sure what it is. And I didn't tell him what it is, but what it is I give them all an A all the time, all the time. So when I look at somebody about to play a solo, or if somebody makes a mistake or anything, the look that I give them is that I trust them, I love them, I know they want to do well. And it's a beautiful relationship that is a huge privilege on both sides. And that's true for a teacher in front of a class. What a privilege it is. Imagine what a privilege it is to stand in front of a class of young people and know that what you're teaching them and who you're being is going to influence not only them, but every single person they interact with for the rest of their lives.
Amazing. You mentioned The Art of Possibility. This is your book. And I just wanted to mention a quick heartfelt gratitude from Joel, one of our other listeners. That book with your wife, The Art of Possibility, was the kindling that grew into a blaze of passion for making and sharing the real power of classical and all music for that matter. So, yeah, thank you very much from him and everyone that's read it. Where do people find that book out of interest?
It's everywhere. I mean, you get it
Amazon and things. Yep.
Yeah. And it's also in sound, what do you call it?
Audible, audiobook.
Yeah, the trouble with the audio is you can't write on it. People love to write all over the book, yellow mark, all the passages they love. But it does have all the music that I refer to.
Ah, great. That's a huge advantage of an audiobook for a music
right, it is.
title.
You actually hear, when I talk about the Chopin, talk about Mahler, talk about these things, it's all there.
Did you record it? Is it your voice?
Oh, of course. Yeah, we did.
Wonderful. I've really got into audiobooks recently, actually. I don't know, I pushed it away for ages and thought, oh, that's rubbish. I like reading a book and taking notes, but I love it now.
Yeah, I like it. But the trouble is, if you want to find something, you can never find it.
That is true.
The real book, you've got the page. My recommendation is buy both, and then you'll have the advantage. Mobile you can listen to in the car, and the other you can read at home. But I will tell you one thing about that great woman who I was married to, and with whom I'm in a lifelong relationship of possibility, is that we divorced, separated and then divorced. But she said something incredibly beautiful and important when we separated. She said, when you're related to somebody, you're related for the rest of your life. Let's make it the best relationship we know how. And we have done that, and we've continued exactly as before. She's now married to somebody else, fantastic person, and they have a wonderful relationship. But our relationship around possibility has remained absolutely clear and constant. I was on the phone with her for an hour today talking about doing and engaging. And that, to me, has been a huge gift. Because most people, when they separate, they try to make the other person as miserable as possible to justify what happened. But it's a mistake. It's a mistake.
Oh, wonderful. Ben, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you today. Thank you so much. I feel like I've had a little performance. I've heard you play. I've been able to watch you conduct and gesture. It's just been magnificent. Before we wrap up, was there anything? I mean, you are clearly so positive about the future of music and music education. Is there anything else you wanted to say to the teachers out there who have had a super difficult year and a half?
Don't lose heart, because the thing is, the world depends on us. The bankers and the real estate agents and all those people, the letters that we get, and I'm sure it's true for all of you too, the letters we get of gratitude and appreciation from former students about what it was that we gave them. Bankers and real estate agents don't get those letters, because we touch the heart. We shape the way of thinking of the people. And if we can keep that faith, it's really a question of keeping faith. And faith is what's important. I don't mean religious faith. I mean faith in ourselves. Because expectations lead to disappointment. So don't look for expectations, and hope is only, you only have hope if you doubt, right? If you think it's not going to work. So faith is that which enables us to go forward, knowing that we're making a difference, knowing that what we're doing is of significance and it will have an impact on everybody we touch. And that is, if we give up, and particularly, I must say, not only in difficult times, but also in times where religion is no longer providing to most people that inspiration and recourse, it actually goes to the music teachers. We are finally the most important people left. I mean, I just invented that. It's not true, but it'll do.
I know. Just hearing that will have lit a flame and rekindled a lot of teachers' energy, Ben. So thank you for saying it.
At least made a little smile across the face. But I'll tell you one last thing, and that is that in fact, if I may, two things. One is that we think of people being cynical, and certainly if you're a conductor and you go a lot of guest conducting and you see a lot of faces that look cynical, I have a way of dealing with that, which is to say that a cynical person is a passionate person who doesn't want to be disappointed again. So now suddenly, instead of having a lot of cynical people, I have a lot of passionate people. And it's a plausible argument because they went into music and they certainly didn't do it for the money. So they went in because they were passionate about it. And then they had one disappointment after another. So our job is to speak to the passion. And if I may tell one story, which I think has to be affect people the way it affected me, which was I met a woman who had survived Auschwitz, and she went to Auschwitz and she was 15 years old. I tell this story so many times, but I never, ever feel that it is not alive to me. It just is the memory of her telling it. She was 15, her brother was 8, and the parents were lost, and they were in a cattle train going to Poland, to Auschwitz from Germany. And she noticed that her brother had lost one of his shoes, and she was furious. She said, "Why are you so stupid? You're always losing things. For goodness sake, can't you keep your things together?" Perfectly natural for an elder sister to feel that and feel fearful. But unfortunately, it was the last thing she ever said to him because she didn't see him again. He didn't survive. And so when she came out of Auschwitz at the end of the war, she made a vow. And the vow was, "I will never say anything that couldn't stand as the last thing I ever say." And I asked her whether she really, and I asked her husband, I said, "Is that really, yeah, does she do that?" "Yes," she said, that's who she is. And of course, it's not anything that we can achieve. We can't do it, but it is a possibility to live into. And I love passing on that story because it's not about living the right life or being right. It's just a possibility. So thank you.
Well, thank you. It's been absolutely magical to connect with you. I'm so glad we could make it happen. For those of you who want to find out more about Ben and all his great work, just Google his name. It'll come up with many, many hits. And you've also got the Benjamin Zander Center over at benjaminzander.org.
Yeah, very shortly that's going to hit. We're not quite ready to launch it, but it's going to be very exciting.
That's the new website?
Right. Yeah, the new website. And people can write in, and I'm going to be the guide on that website, taking people around and showing them things. And I want to tell your listeners that your eyes have been shining so brightly since we began this conversation. It's a complete joy to be engaged with you, I must say.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed every minute. So thank you so much for being on the show, Ben.
Great. What a pleasure.
Well, I hope you enjoyed today's interview with Ben Zander as much as we enjoyed putting it together for you. It was an absolute joy to have him on the show, and I hope he's given you some inspiration and some ideas that you can take away with you. Now, as I mentioned at the start, make sure you do go and watch his inspirational talks and masterclasses. His TED Talk with like 20 million views or whatever he said at the start is wonderful to watch, and you can get a real sense of him in action. Although I have a feeling that even if you were listening to today's episode, you would have got a huge sense of the kind of man that he is and the ideas that he has. Well, today was actually the last episode for a while. We're going to be taking a break until the start of 2022. I can't even believe I'm saying that. It seems like 2022 sounds like so futuristic, but not that far away, only a month or two. So I really hope you've enjoyed this year's episodes. We've tried to mix things up with always a variety of guests, but also some different hosts as well. We'd love to know what you thought about some of our other hosts, some of the topics that we've had, some of our sponsors. What would you like to hear in the future? What has your favorite episode been this year? We would just be delighted to know. And you can let us know over at our Top Music Teachers Facebook group or on the show notes page for this episode, which is over at topmusic.co/episode 266. If you're not a Facebook user, you can jump in over there and leave a comment. We'd love to know future guests you'd love us to interview, some of your favorites, any questions you've got, and any feedback as well. We're always open to learning and changing and mixing things up. Next year, we're going to be back with a mix of topics and hosts again, and also introducing some guitar episodes as well with our head of guitar, Michael Gumley. Now that we've launched our Top Music Guitar program, it's going to be super exciting to include some podcasts related to guitar as well. And as always, if you've got any questions or any sort of more private comments or anything like that you want to send us, you can do that over at support@topmusic.co. In the meantime, we'll be continuing to hang out with all our Top Music Pro members, piano and guitar members over in our membership. If you haven't joined us yet and want to find out all the good stuff about our Top Music Pro membership, then head to topmusicpro.com and you'll be able to get all the details that you need over there. Well, that's it from me. I'm Tim Topham and you've been listening to the Topcast. We will see you next year. Bye-bye, everyone. Have a great holiday period ahead. For more information about this episode and to find out how to enhance your own teaching, visit topmusic.co. You'll find everything you need for your studio, from lesson plans to cheat sheets, quick win teaching ideas, and guides on how to build your teaching business. Plus, you'll be connected to a global community of the world's top music teachers. And when you're ready, join hundreds of other teachers around the world by becoming a Top Music Pro member and get access to all our bonus content and flagship courses. And don't forget to follow topmusic.co on social media and subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to it. That's all for today. We'll see you in the studio.